So we've been talking for a number of weeks about boundaries for your soul. And this is a book by Allison Cook and Kimberly Miller. They've written some very interesting things that I think are helpful for the intersection of our emotional life and our spiritual life. Today, we're going to talk about the three parts of our soul. If you think about it, every major school of psychology has acknowledged the mosaic nature of the human soul. The human soul is beautiful in many ways. It's complex in many ways. It has distinct parts, just like a mosaic. It's beautiful and complex, but unity is really the key to a mosaic, right? A mosaic makes sense because there's a sense of unity to it. And when we think about the three parts of ourselves, that's one of the things we want to have in our mind today, is that we want to have a sense of unity with those three parts. It was King David, from ancient times, back in the book of Psalm 86:11. He said, "Give me an undivided heart that I may fear your name." And he's talking to God there. He's saying, give me an undivided heart. I don't want to have a heart that's divided. I don't want to have a mind that is going two ways. I want to have an undivided heart. And so that's what we're really after with the three parts of ourselves. We don't want them to be divided. We don't want them to be working against each other. And so part of what we've been talking about the last number of weeks is IFS, or internal family systems. This is an evidence-based approach that was developed in the 1990s by a psychologist named Richard Schwartz. And when I say evidence-based, it means that they have done many studies on it to show that it is effective in helping people grow and develop in their emotional lives. And we need to have a framework for the soul. We need to have a framework for emotional health and healing. And this particular approach maps out the soul this way. Maps it out with managers and firefighters and exiles around the outside. And in the middle, we have the heart, or the spirit-led self. If you want to know more about the spirit-led self, you can go back to last week's discussion, which we talked all about the spirit-led self. But today we're going to focus on these three other parts, which is the managers, the firefighters, and the exiles. Those are the three parts. The top two parts, the managers and the firefighters, are the ones that work to keep us from pain. Nobody that I know likes to have pain in their lives. We rather do without spiritual pain or emotional pain, or in some cases, physical pain. These two protectors, the managers and the firefighters, are consistent, and they're persistent, and they're accustomed to being in charge. So they want to be in charge. The protectors fall into one of two categories. I already mentioned managers and firefighters. They try to protect you from the overwhelming feelings of the more vulnerable parts of your soul. So there are vulnerable parts of you, and the managers and the firefighters work really hard to keep those vulnerable parts from being got at. And so what the managers do, the managers strive to keep you emotionally safe and prevent the more vulnerable parts of you from experiencing harm. This is the parts that would drive you to perform. I've been watching recently The Last Dance by Michael Jordan, and he definitely has this part where he has this need to perform that comes from his family and his childhood, because his brother was older than him, I believe, and better than him at basketball at one point. And so that drove Michael Jordan, and it drove him all the way into his later years. Also, we would have a drive to produce, a drive to protect, and a drive to please other people. This is all the managers' work. The ways that managers try to protect us is by helping us worry unnecessarily about situations out of our control. Sometimes it's about people pleasing, where the manager says you have to keep these people pleased or something bad's going to happen. Sometimes it's about working long hours at the expense of others, like our family, or overanalyzing relationships and decisions and going over it and over it in our minds, or criticizing ourselves or others excessively, or exerting extreme control over our own behaviors or the behaviors of others. And then also pursuing perfection and refusing to accept human limitations. Let's face it, we all have human limitations, but our manager, the internal critic, the manager says, no, you don't. Keep pushing. You got to get better or else. The firefighters are a bit different. You'll see the firefighters are on the right-hand side. The firefighters, they strive to minimize our suffering. So they extinguish pain many times after the pain occurs. They're trying to extinguish it. These impulsive parts indulge in a lot of whatever feels good and distract us and trick us into believing that we're handling life well. Now, at their best, firefighters can help you care well for yourself so that you can effectively manage life's hardships. Of course, when the firefighters get out of hand, that's when things go wrong. But they can remind us when it's time to rest, and they can help us unwind. So they do have a function that can be good. The firefighting activities that would numb unwanted feelings, this would be the bad side of the firefighters, is where the firefighter might have us mindlessly surfing the web and escaping through social media. Or maybe it would be in over-exercising or overeating or over-cleaning or overspending or oversleeping. Or maybe it's watching entertainment and we're going to do that excessively. Or maybe it's gambling. Or for some, it might be a sexual addiction or excessively daydreaming or escaping into romance novels. Or for some, it would be abusing alcohol and drugs. These are all things that would numb us. And the idea is the firefighters are trying to put out the pain of the past, and they're trying to do it with these activities. Now, why do managers and firefighters work so hard? You see they're at the top of the diagram. They're often working to keep the exiles down at the bottom, to keep the exiles out of view. The exiles are about the parts of us that experience brokenness, and brokenness that we can't fix no matter how hard we try. It would be sadness, perhaps, that we can't undo, or parts of us harboring feelings and insecurities that we would rather the world not see. And so these managers take care of that so that no one can see what's really going on underneath the surface for us. The exiles are banished, or they're in hiding. And what's happening there is that we are exiling memories from the past, or maybe sensations, things that we felt in our body at particular times in our lives when things were going wrong. And for some of us, it would be we're exiling the emotions that we felt. We're also exiling the parts of us that were hurt most by the events in the past where we've been hurt. Now, the following feelings would signal that an exile needs attention. So that would be if you see shame or fear or insecurity or hurt or feelings of worthlessness or a sense of being marginalized, set off to the side, being pushed out, or a sense of being unseen, unappreciated, or overlooked. And of course, also loneliness and sadness could fit in this category. So that's the exiles. As far as it goes, the Bible has something to say about something similar to this, and that's in 1 Corinthians 12 and verse 22. It says the parts of the body that seem weaker are the ones that we cannot do without. So these vulnerable parts of ourselves, we can't cut them out. We can't stomp them down. We can't stick them in a corner or make them hide. We need those parts, and those parts need to come out and they need to be dealt with. I'm thinking of a hard-working man that I worked with in the past. He had a drive that wouldn't stop him. He had this manager that was protecting him, this internal manager, and part of it was that he really wanted to please people, and that manager told him he needed to please everybody. He would even drink in social situations because he thought others wanted him and needed him to be the life of the party. And so even when he was drinking, he was doing it out of a sense of duty and to please others. And then, of course, that was that we would call that a firefighter because he was drinking also to cover over pain that he didn't even really know he had because he had been covering it over for so long. Part of it was about the loss of a parent early in life, maybe the pain of divorce for some people. For others, maybe like losing a family member. And those overwhelming feelings are based on prior experiences. And for this particular person I'm thinking about, there was a time when he was seen as not being reliable. And so this manager was telling him, you need to be reliable. You need to step up. And that part of him like overtook him and overwhelmed him. So the exiles were not healed. Those parts of him that were grieving never had a chance to grieve. And so the manager and the firefighters were working overtime to keep those feelings at bay. And that is until he learned that overworking and drinking weren't the only options, that there were other options for him. And the managers inside of him and the firefighters began to gain trust in God's Spirit as we begin to work through this and expose these things as we talk it through. Now his exiles can get the help that they need, and he can actually grieve the losses and grieve divorce or grieve a loss of a loved one. Jesus said that in this world we would have trouble. We know that trouble is going to come. We know that difficult times are going to come. And so it's best not to ignore the troubling thoughts and feelings and the things that have happened to us. We need to work through them. We need to be present with them and accompany them like a parent would lead a young child. That's the process. Even amidst the hard circumstances, we don't need to feel overwhelmed, because Jesus promises that we can experience peace and we can take heart because he has overcome. Now, when we're talking about this, we want to be clear, the goal is not to eradicate parts of our soul that carry anger or fear or sadness or grief or shame, but we want to lead them with curiosity and compassion. These parts of us can grow to trust in the guidance of our Spirit-led self and take in God's love. We will look at the 5 steps in the coming weeks, which offer us a way to care for our internal family, all these emotions and sensations and feelings we have inside of us, so that we can discover wholeness. And as a result, we're going to discover peace and joy and the abundant life that we're meant to live. And so there was a king, his name was David. I mentioned him earlier. He had a divided heart. You remember he made lots of mistakes in his life, but he asked God to give him an undivided heart. He said, God, give me an undivided heart that I may fear you. In our next session, we're going to discuss the first step in the 5 steps of taking a U-turn and using any emotion that feels like it's going to overwhelm us and bring us to that place where we don't have a divided heart, where we have a unity within all these, especially these 3 parts that we're talking about today with the managers, the firefighters, and the exiles. We need them to be working well together. And the only thing that can make it work well together is that thing in the center of the diagram, which is our Spirit-led self. Just a quick reminder for those who haven't seen this part of the talk is that there are 2 resources that could really help you along these lines. If this is intriguing to you, I encourage you to get this movie called Inside Out. It's a Disney Pixar movie, and that's the cover that you're looking for. It's a really great animated film that will help you understand what we're talking about. And also this book, Boundaries for Your Soul by Allison Cook and Kimberly Miller. We're just kind of walking through every Wednesday at 4. We're working through 1 chapter at a time, and you're welcome to join us online when we do that. You can reach out to me for the link for that. And also, I think at the bottom I have a website. You can go to that website as well, and there are some specific resources on that website that you can also download. Thank you for joining us today and watching.